Hi, everybody. Today, I am going to talk to you a little bit about all or nothing thinking, and you'll have to excuse my voice because I was sick last week and I'm just still getting over this stuff. I know a lot's going around, so I have a little bit of a scratchy throat. So I'll just do the best I can. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Krista Zaft, and this is the Becoming Sound podcast. So thanks for joining me. If you're new here, welcome. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about all or nothing thinking, which has definitely been a part of my life all too much. I can tell you that. So, especially as an adult child. Okay, so what if I told you that all or nothing thinking is keeping you from probably the greatest love of your life? And if I told you that this pattern of thinking, and that's what it is, it's actually just a pattern, is usually hiding in plain sight. It's hiding in our conversations. It's hiding in our internal dialogue, the thoughts that we think about ourselves, and it's hiding in the words that we use with our loved ones. It's true. So what does it look like? What can we do about it? What does it sound like? So let's find out. Welcome to the Becoming Sound podcast, where we dive into the tough stuff and try to find the humor in the hot mess of being an adult child. Join me as we peel back the layers on growing up in dysfunction, navigating substance abuse, mental health challenges, and everything in between. So today we're going to dissect a little bit of the all or nothing thinking, which definitely I've personally recognized in myself at many times in my past. And it makes sense because it can be linked to experiences of trauma, particularly in childhood. And a lot of the time it's rooted in the messages that we receive and the actions of our parents, and what we have internalized from their attitudes and the dysfunction. I can hear the words in my own head right now. So often we swear we'll never be like our parents. And then all of a sudden one day you hear them in your own voice, whether it's out loud or in your head. And the reason it's hiding in plain sight is because we say things and we don't even realize it. As adult children, we live so much in our heads. And so we just accept and believe the language we unconsciously use because it's very familiar. And this isn't just limited to those who've come from dysfunctional homes or adult children of alcoholics. It can be a really common thing for many people to use occasionally, once in a while. But for those of us who have past traumas, it's something that creeps into your life and it becomes maladaptive when you're older. When someone engages in this type of thinking, they either believe themselves to be successful or a failure in all the things they do in life. And you see yourself as either being worthy or not worthy, and that has a huge effect on your self-esteem. You can also start to see others in this binary light as well, which can lead to harsh and unfair judgments of yourself and others. It can make the world feel like a very bleak place, and this can help to cement your feelings of negativity and depression and anxiety and all the things that go along with that when things aren't exactly the way that you think they should be. So what does it look like? How do we become aware of it? How do we learn to manage it and over time create new patterns of thought and speech so that we can change it? All or nothing thinking is a common cognitive distortion or a pattern of thought that usually divides experiences into black and white or right or wrong. And most of the time, it's not based in fact. It is when we see things as either or and leave little room for possibility, so we're constantly putting things into one box or another. And the gray area is not as clear. So what are a couple of examples of all or nothing thinking? So let's say in the case of self-perception, a student says, well, if I don't get an A on all of my exams, then I'm a failure. Or a woman sees retouched photos on Instagram. This is a common one. And to herself, she says, well, my body doesn't look like that. So I hate my body. I must not be good enough. And I mean, I think we all can relate to this on some level for sure. And I think one that sticks with me is I can't finish everything or I can't do everything perfectly, so I'm not even going to start. That's another black and white or all or nothing thinking. Um, if you find yourself saying things like, you never ask me how I'm feeling, or I'm trying to talk to you and you never listen, stuff like that in a relationship of any kind. If you notice that there's a pattern of words like never and must and always in your language a lot, you can see how that can be very rigid. They're really just distorted beliefs and patterns of thinking that we've adopted over time. Many all or nothing statements have serious flaws. The person making them can't possibly stand behind the statement. I mean, it's not possible if you think about it. They're just definite statements and no one really acts all one way or not another all the time. If you can resonate with being the person that's on the receiving end of that, I mean, you can get defensive, especially in a situation where you're with a partner arguing or something. You really just think to yourself, well, that's not true. I don't always do that. I do it sometimes. And so there's a middle ground, and people who think in absolutes usually push forward with a sense of fear, a lot of closed-mindedness. It's like a response that's been programmed into your head from childhood, and it stems back to a stage where you may have felt wrong or faulty. And when we hear any form of criticism is taken as an attack. And we're usually just repeating a pattern of something that was hurtful that we witnessed or experienced in childhood. Some of the internalized thought patterns that adult children use sound something like, I never listen, or I must never be angry, or I can't trust men, or I can't trust women. I always find a way to screw things up. I mean, you get the idea. Viewing situations in extremes can limit our ability to see the middle ground and the gray areas in between. And those are the areas where the good stuff happens. Those are the areas where we learn and we grow and we hold compassion for others and ourselves. If we're always thinking in absolutes, we just don't have that ability. And it creates unrealistic expectations. It fuels perfectionism, which leads to more feelings of failure, low self-esteem. These thinking patterns increase anxiety and depression, and in some cases, we just avoid challenges or opportunities altogether. We've closed the door on that. We have difficulty forgiving and even believing in ourselves. Our relationships become strained due to a lot of unrealistic expectations. And ultimately, this is one of the things that stops you from truly loving yourself. And that's the most important person is you. So how do we start to tackle these thought patterns? How do we better manage, the dialogue in our head? And how do we transform them into something that actually serves us? I can hear my coach's voice in my head right now with this reminder. Our thoughts directly affect our feelings, our emotions, and our emotions create our actions, which create our results. And if you're looking at yourself and you don't like the results that you have, then it's time to reflect back on your thoughts, your perception first, and create a space of awareness so that we're open to change. So I'm going to go through 5 tips to manage these all or nothing thinking patterns. The first one is called master metacognition, which is just a fancy name for noticing. It starts with awareness. And if you can notice your patterns, you start to pay attention in the moments when you seem to be in all or nothing phrases or thoughts. Keep a notepad with you. Write down little, just kind of like you're doing a research paper. Write down all your thoughts. Write down the words you're saying. Notice where you are, who you're with at that time. When you do notice something, pay attention to your emotions in the moment too. What are you feeling? What are you going through? Identifying the pattern is the first step. And the more details you notice about it, the more aware you become, the easier it gets to recognize your language. Second one is emotional regulation, which is the ability to recognize your emotions in yourself and others around you. It may allow you to control your reactions when you face a challenge. You can develop this tool by learning to self-soothe. Learning to pause was a huge one for me. Just taking a breath in the moment, just stepping away from the situation for 1 second and take a nice deep breath in, Practice counting to 5, maybe just to stop yourself in that moment before responding to someone. This will heighten your awareness. It will keep you in the moment. And it takes daily practice too. So give yourself a little compassion, go easy on yourself, and seek out the gray areas. Adopting this phrase, yes and, can be a game changer for all or nothing thinkers. Replacing the word but with yes and sounds something like this. I'm a good person and sometimes I make mistakes. Or I didn't finish the whole project today. Yes, and it's okay. I can allow myself to finish the rest tomorrow. It's just a way of seeing the positive. I don't know what number we're on, but asking questions and challenging your negative thought patterns. We reframe the thoughts in our heads by pausing and asking, is this thought 100% accurate or helpful? Be compassionate and honest with yourself. If it's not, try to reframe the question and keep the gray area in mind. We can also consistently practice mindfulness. I'm a huge advocate for this, which allows us to be present, focus, and be in the moment. Sitting in silence with ourselves intentionally allows us to ground ourselves, to listen. Gratitude practice, whether it be journaling or repeating affirmations, can help to see the positive in your life. Talking to yourself as if you were your beloved friend and ask yourself, would I say this to my friend? Like, would I talk this way to my friend? So reframing patterns can be really important. And the last one is asking for support. I was terrified to ask for support when I was younger, and I've said this before in so many episodes. It is one of the most valuable tools you will learn as an adult child. Reaching out, finding a trusted family member or a friend, ask them to be a sounding board for you. Trust within yourself to know it's safe and valuable to share what you're going through. And if I've said it once, I've said it a dozen times before. We are not meant to do this alone. And it's probably one of the biggest epiphanies I've had in my life is that it's okay to share. It's okay to not be okay. And reaching out can be one of the greatest gifts that you give yourself for sure. And just surrounding yourself with a positive social network every day and every time you practice this, it gets easier and easier. And you start to open yourself up to the possibilities, the opportunities, and the positive things in life. And then reaching out to a mental health professional who can help you identify your triggers. Maybe there's some underlying contributing patterns, and they have tools that can be learned and you can work with. Just remember, it took a while to learn this kind of behavior and to learn this all or nothing thinking. So have some grace with yourself. And when you're learning a new pattern, it's not easy, but it's well worth the time and practice that you put in. You've already become aware just by listening to this episode. And once you become aware, it's really hard to become unaware of the patterns in your life. So you've done the first step, which is usually the hardest. So congrats. And I believe in you. And I know with practice and consistency, you will be open to learning new and more beneficial patterns of thinking. So to recap, here are the 5 tips that can help you begin the process to reframe and repattern your all or nothing thinking. Number 1 was master meta recognition, or simply noticing to become aware of the current patterns of thought. Number 2 was emotional regulation, recognizing emotions and practicing mindfulness. Number 3 was adopting the phrase yes and in place of but. And number 4 was asking yourself questions and challenging the negative thoughts. And number 5 was reaching out for support. And that's so important while you're making big changes. I think there's a quote that goes something like this. I'm not sure who wrote it. I just know it's not me. So, you are today where your thoughts have brought you. You will be tomorrow where your thoughts take you. And that is so true. It all starts with our thoughts. So on that note, have a fabulous day. I hope you learned a little something. And thanks for joining me. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Becoming Sound. If this episode resonated with you in some way, please share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It helps to get this information out to more people who may need it. If you have a sec, I would love a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. While you're there, hit the 5-star rating and give me a review. When you're scrolling, follow me on my social platforms, and I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Have a fabulous day. Lots of love and gratitude from me. Please note, the views, information, and opinions expressed during the Becoming Sound podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved. The content of this podcast is to educate, inform, and for entertainment purposes only. This podcast series and the content presented does not constitute for medical or other professional advice or services. If you are in crisis or in need of help, please contact your medical or professional provider.